Have you ever seen these pictures and wondered why other forms of life remind us so heavily of ourselves? That's because all life share characteristics of growth, structure, reproduction, metabolism, movement, complexity, and adaptation. On this episode of Plant Biology, we're going in depth about these attributes of living organisms. Growth in general is an increase of mass and volume, typically from new cells. However, with more cell growth, there comes more opportunity for variability due to genetics and the environment. This can be both a good thing and a bad thing. Take, for example, an environment with lots of resources, like a rainforest. There are many opportunities for organisms to have multiple things they eat, places they live, and resources to shelter. This can increase variability in organisms because it allows the organism to have plenty of growth in the environment. However, variability that leads to mutations like a change in fur color, in beak size, or in limb shape could result in undesirable characteristics. Overall, variability for organisms is generally considered a good thing, but sometimes it can be a problem too. Reproduction can happen either sexually or asexually in living organisms. Most bacteria are asexual, meaning that they reproduce 100% copy of themselves. Going back to that idea of variability, this obviously does not leave a lot of variability between bacteria cell to bacteria cell. Therefore, if their environment was to rapidly change, that probably wouldn't be a good thing for them. Plants in general have a mix of asexual and sexual reproduction. We will look more at this in a different video, but in general, plants can have male and female parts leading to sexual reproduction, or they can go through vegetative propagation, which is asexual reproduction. This would be like if you cut a limb off a plant, plopped it in some water, and allowed it to grow. That would be vegetative propagation. As for animals, and specifically those that are threatened or endangered, reproduction can be quite difficult due to lack of partnering opportunities or very specific environmental conditions needed for reproduction changing because of climate change. Response to stimuli is something that is very characteristic of living things. For example, kick a rock down the road. It's just a rock. It's not going to do anything, right? But kick your brother in the shin and you will see screaming, crying, and potentially a phone being taken away from you. Animals, and therefore humans, tend to have much more dramatic responses to stimuli than other organisms like plants. This could be for a few reasons, such as conservation of energy or access to resources. See, while animals can move around to get nutrients and water that they need, plants don't really have that luxury. Plants rely much more on the natural environment to provide. So that means that they can't be wasting energy getting scared over the new horror movie that has been released. Metabolism is the collective biochemical processes taking place in living organisms. For plants, photosynthesis is the main energy harnessing process. Both animals and plants undergo respiration, which is the main energy releasing process. But don't worry, we will go into these processes more in depth in another video. Other metabolic processes include assimilation, which is the building of products for cells, and digestion, which is the breakdown process of molecules. Movement is one of those things where outside of the animal world, it is very, very slow in comparison. Keep in mind, movement is not confined to the organism, but can be seen in the cellular level. For example, cytoplasm, which is a main component of all living things' cells, flows like a river, delivering nutrients or molecules to organelles. And this is called cytoplasmic streaming, which just sounds like the most edgy Spotify playlist ever. There are some fast movements of plants, including the Venus flytrap catching its prey. However, for the most part, you would need some type of time-lapse video to see the major movements of most plants. Complexity of living organisms is something special as well. At the smallest of living things, cells make up organisms. However, we can go smaller than that into atoms and molecules. And these help to describe how cells are built in the first place. Atoms and molecules are the foundations of all living and non-living things in our universe. We will investigate atoms and molecules and building into cells more next video. But overall, as a scale, these foundations are so small that we think of the average cell as having like 1 trillion molecules. Our last attribute for living organisms is adaptation to the environment. This one closely relates to the response of stimuli from things like air, light, soil, or water. However, the main difference is how well each organism actually adapts to that stimuli. For example, some species can adapt very easily, while others are so specialized to their environment that it makes it nearly impossible to adapt. This, of course, can have drastic effects and lead to these organisms becoming threatened or endangered. But that wraps up all of our attributes of living organisms. So to absorb all that we just went through, let's end it with 2 discussion questions. Also, don't forget to comment on other people's posts so that we can all grow in our knowledge together. And until next time, happy sciencing, everyone. Bye! Our first discussion question says, can part of an organism be alive while another part is dead? Explain. Our second discussion question is, what is the difference between inheritance of traits by genetics and inheritance of traits by the environment?